It's about history. It's about preservation. It's about sense of place here on Eastern Long Island. With Esperanza Leon, I'm Irwin Levy, and this is Our Hamptons. Esperanza.
Hello, my friend Irwin. And where are we going today?
I think I have to take you to school.
Oh,
that sounded weird.
That sounded a little creepy. You're not driving a white van, are you?
No, yeah, exactly. Hi, here's some candy. No, definitely not.
Oh, terrible.
Definitely
What a
not.
start.
But it's funny. I mentioned this to Esperanza, before we started recording for this episode, how this subject was sort of always on the back burner for me. There's something really interesting about the amount of one-room schoolhouses on Eastern Long Island. Not only how many there were, but incredibly how many still exist today, Esperanza.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, whether they're actually used still as a gathering place or as a school, in fact, or they're like $3 million residences,
All of the above, actually. And you mentioned something earlier, which I'm gonna repeat, and I'm crediting you for this. How Esperanza said when we were talking earlier, how honestly a schoolhouse is probably the most important civic building in a community.
Yeah, one
And
of at least, yeah. That and a church, I mean,
yeah,
the origins of,
exactly.
yeah.
But
Or they were interchangeable. You had your
in certain
spiritual
times,
gatherings and your academic gatherings.
right? And I mean,
In the same
they
building.
all, especially back in the day, these places had sort of multiple lives. But we're going to sort of go west to east geographically with some deviation, just to touch on some of these, and then we're going to make it a little more personal when we start wrapping up, and I think our audience will see what we mean. But if we start in the west, and this is courtesy of the Quogue Historical Society, um, they did have a one-room schoolhouse circa 1822, and in the Europe, in the late 1790s, there were 12 households in Quogue, a population hard to believe, almost 100 people,
Wow. Yeah.
around there. Um, and they mention how the earliest record of schooling from 1795 to 6, 24 boys, 9 girls, attending a 3.5 month session taught by Josiah Foster, old Eastern Long Island name for sure.
Yeah.
And I did have to interject this, how even in 1813, at that point, the town of Southampton created 15 separate school districts.
Yes.
And that's, again, you hear this kind of thing all the time about, oh, we need to consolidate and all of this duplication. But even, 1813, all of those years ago, over 200 years ago, 15 districts running numerically west to east.
You had to, right? I mean, this was a time when, and even today, I would question, the distances that people would have had to travel to go to school. And I mean, I watched enough Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
As idyllic as that might have looked,
And it's true. We do. I mean, we really do have to bring that across. I mean, there weren't school.
You had to have a school close to where you lived. In other words,
there weren't school buses. Okay,
exactly.
I don't know this. They were horse and buggy or walking or whatever the heck, however they were getting there. But anyway, so Quogue residents completed this schoolhouse in 1822, and incredibly, it was in use up until 1893. During those years, according to the Historical Society, it was the only public building in Quogue. And Esperanza, you mentioned this earlier, when not in school, it was Sunday school and prayer meetings.
Right, yeah.
So that's sort of...
Yeah, they're like the hub of the community.
completely. And again, it was the only public building,
Hmm.
and now in 1893, they did build a newer, larger, a mammoth-sized two-room schoolhouse as opposed to one on Jessup Avenue, now the site of the Quogue Fire Department. The old schoolhouse was closed and abandoned, but apparently in the early 1900s, an Abram Post moved it to his property just east of the Quogue Library, and it was used as a workshop.
Yeah, another thing that I do love. I mean, I think we have to stop doing this. A little interjection here, Irwin.
Yes, of course.
It's nothing new that buildings would be abandoned and their use is abandoned, right? But it happened more often back then. The people would reuse buildings and move
That's
them and take them here and there and turn them into something else. And I mean, this is a great example of that. So,
uh, uh,
recycling at its best.
recycling at its best, 1,000% true. And also, Esperanza, what always I always marvel at, again, going back all these years ago, something you just touched on, moving the structures.
Yes.
When you
Oh my
think
gosh,
about it,
incredible.
you like it's hard to almost wrap your arms around.
True horsepower.
How do you move a house?
And
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's got a foundation. And they just get moved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They just got lifted up and moved, and people were experts on that, and they would get injured. I mean, we're not talking
right,
about moving houses these days, although it's happening a lot again,
right.
lifting them and so forth. But yeah, it's another thing that I find fascinating. The one advantage back then, no telephone poles, no utility poles.
That's right. That's right. I remember we touched on that
And big open fields. Remember, yeah, we did touch on that,
we
right?
touched on that in the episode about the Sea Spray Inn, how when they
Exactly.
moved that to the beach, um, it was very dicey getting that over there because of a lot of those the utility lines and whatnot. But yeah, so I guess it was in a sense a little easier there at that point. But um, moving on, I mean, he ultimately donated the schoolhouse to the Quogue Library, and it's been used as a museum by the then newly formed historical committee, and it was moved again to the grounds of the library in 48 and opened as a museum where I think it still
Mm.
is in existence.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that building, again, dating back from 1822, still there, but
Yeah.
repurposed a few times.
Right, right.
Now,
Many lives. Yeah.
many lives, many lives. And we're going to go a little bit further to the west, further east from Quogue. And now this was a schoolhouse, the Red Creek Schoolhouse. There is a community in Hampton Bays, around Red Creek. It was actually apparently a village at one point, but um, this was within the village of Red Creek on Peconic Bay, the Hampton Bays Flanders border. And
Mm.
this schoolhouse, served those children. Uh, this is from a New York State Almanac 2019. I just found this on the internet, randomly researching. This building, by the way, we should touch on this, Esperanza, because we love this place. This is one of those little buildings on the grounds of the Rogers Mansion Museum complex in Southampton by the
Right,
history.
right. The Southampton History Museum. And just a little shout out to our friend Sarah Couts, who is the new director there, and she's
Uh,
terrific. And I see a lot of possibility for new interpretations of all those buildings with her at that place.
I would agree. So yeah, shout out to Sarah. She was with Long Island, the Preservation
Preservations.
Long Island
Yep.
previously, but now she's at Southampton History Museum. But I have to say, and again, living in Springs, I'm not going to say I get to this place all that frequently because I feel like I might as well go home to Queens once I'm over there.
Yeah, you forgot your
Um,
passport.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, especially in the summer. Yeah, let's go over there. Okay, let's get there at noon, so let's leave at 9. But uh, I love that little complex.
It is. It's
The
pretty
little
cool.
hill. It's so well done. Whoever out in our audience hasn't visited it, um, I'm going to give them my personal endorsement. It's a lot of fun. They have a little Hildreth's building and multiple others. Really well done.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
a little village complex right on one property, and the mansion itself is also an interesting building, which it's the Rogers Mansion, museum complex, but it was also occupied by Samuel Parrish, as you may know, who founded the
Right.
Parrish Museum. So
Absolutely. And
the
so
ghosts
this,
are still there.
yeah, 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 yeah. You do get that kind of vibe, that haunted vibe around there. I have
Oh,
to
they are
admit it.
there.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It does. But the point is, it really is a worthwhile
Yes.
complex to visit. It really is a lot of fun. But anyway, this particular school, and it's as again restored now and it's on the grounds, but it was built in the mid 19th century. They're thinking as early as 1830, and again, a rare surviving schoolhouse within the town. It was restored. There was a $50,000 grant from the Gardner Foundation, who, they support a lot of local,
Oh,
really
yeah.
tremendous what,
Mhm.
the money that gets spread around from that foundation. And a Nathan Tuttle, now that's a name I recognize, Esperanza, right? That's a,
Tuttle, yep.
familiar name. I mean, he was the carpenter and and he did it. So, yeah, I mean, and it's really, again, we're giving hey, Esperanza, let's give an Al Hampton's endorsement for this place too. It's really worth a visit. It's really
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
fun.
And
You
I'm
know,
I'm actually astounded that this schoolhouse, which I'm not picturing in my mind on that property, but that it actually could accommodate 40 children is really incredible. That's a lot of kids
it is, and like when you
of all
visit
ages.
when you visit these little ones, and we were talking about the one, not only Clinton Academy in East Hampton Village, but the little red building sort of adjacent to it. We think it's called Hook Pond. We couldn't really remember the name, but you go in there and those desks are so small. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
and like you said, 40 kids are sitting in there. And I don't know if kids were smaller then or not, but I mean, it just seemed really pretty small. But you know, um, moving it forward a little bit, and we culled this information from really a terrific East Hampton Star article from July of 2019, written by Christine Sampson, who writes a lot of good articles with this
Yeah.
kind of subject matter. And also have to give a shout out to Darrell Godfrey, who the photographs in this article were really fantastic. So if this subject matter interests you, go to East Hampton Star's website and find this article. It's called Schoolhouses of the South Fork. Again, almost 5 years old right now. And Christine Sampson writes how there's a lot to be learned from these old one room schoolhouses that are scattered about. And Esperanza, to your point, some have become museums, civic meeting houses, while others are just landmarks of a different era.
Mhm.
And of course, one Sagaponack still exists as a one room schoolhouse, but you know,
Arguable
um,
for some people, right?
what's that?
It can be argued by some people that it's not a one-room schoolhouse, but
Yes.
because it's partitioned, or when
Oh,
how
right. We
dare they put a
Esperanza
partition
brought
in?
this up earlier. How how could you call it a partition? Well, Esperanza, I didn't tell you this earlier, but when I was going to school in New York City during the height of New York City budget crises, Ford to City, Drop Dead, and all of that other kind of thing. And we had 48 kids in a classroom. Believe me, there were partitions floating around. Okay. Okay. No, I'm not going to say it was a one room schoolhouse, but okay. You get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. But
I
anyway,
do.
um, so moving on in this article, the old Noyac schoolhouse. Now, Esperanza, we were talking about this earlier.
Mhm.
On Noyac Road, you were bringing out sort of near Trout Pond, which is sort
Yep,
of where I'm trying to
just
picture it
between
in my head
Millstone and
also.
Trout Pond, somewhere in that
was,
vicinity.
it was just that Trout Pound last week, and I wish I would have really thought to really focus in on this, but
Mm.
okay, I wasn't. But I went to look at the daffodils, but that's another conversation. Um, so the old Noyac schoolhouse, assumed it was built around 1796, town landmark, and again, to your point, how history repeats itself, it really is the hub of civic activity these days. Southampton Town owns it. Uh, Monthly meeting house of the Noyac Civic Council, which That's a very active civic association. I've read
hmm
about them over the years. Pretty devoted and active civic association, and also Boy Scout activities. Um, they also use it for. Now, another publication we love, Art and Architecture Quarterly. They describe it as a three. I don't know now. I don't know exactly what this means, but I'm just going to read it. It's a 3-bay hip roofed building with a large brick chimney. So I'm going to call it that. You know what a hip roofed building is, Esperanza? Because that's beyond my pay grade.
Well, yeah, it's hard for me to describe it, but so in other words, you don't have, if you're looking at the building, you don't have a gable facing you, like that little triangle
Okay,
peak
got
facing
it.
you. So it's more of a gentle slope. Hip roof is it kind of meets in the middle, I guess, sort of.
Okay.
I don't know. Terrible that I don't have the
I,
architectural lexicon to describe this, but it just doesn't have that gable, facing the front facade.
on the contrary, by the way,
Mm.
I'm impressed with your versatile knowledge on many a subject. You proved to yourself to be an expert on fishing in the Promised Land episode, and now we're getting a little bit of an architectural thing. So props Esperanza Leon. Come on,
I have to admit that
a
this is
Renaissance woman
terminology.
over here.
Remember, Irwin, English is my second language, and this is terminology that I still struggle with. Like hip roof.
Wow. Okay.
Why would it be called that? Okay, but that's I
Fair.
know what a gable is, so it's
Okay.
not a gabled roof.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, thank you for that. Now, moving a little bit south from well, I shouldn't say south. I guess I should say east. We're going to go into North Haven. So we're going to stay on Noyac Road until we get into North Haven. And at the corner of Ferry Road and Payne Avenue, and this was the second school built in North Haven, dating back to 1847. Um, and incredibly, this old schoolhouse, I was surprised by this, Esperanza. This old schoolhouse is the village's only historical landmark. Um, Surprising. I
In
mean,
North Haven, you mean?
in the village of North Haven.
Hmm.
Yeah. So now, and again, now remember, this article goes back to 2019, but in it, it's describing how the village board approved moving the schoolhouse to the village hall's lot, like further down on Ferry Road. And there's a committee of residents that had plans to use the building as a museum to teach kids about the education long ago. Again, this is 5 years ago. I haven't really heard much about this. I don't know if
Yeah,
that
I
vision
was
ultimately came to be.
right. I wonder why it had to be moved too. So that's a whole other question.
Right, because that
I'm not
was,
familiar with this
yeah,
thing even
and
really.
yeah, it's a thing. It'd be interesting to follow up on it. And then
We should,
if
yeah.
we go a little bit south into Sag Harbor, one of their old schoolhouses, which according to this article in the East Hampton Star, dates back to about 1800. Its couple is still intact and was converted. I like this. Here's what I like about this story. This became a 1,350 square foot, 3-bedroom residence, Esperanza.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean, because
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, I know that there was another schoolhouse, from what I've read in documents that have been provided to me. There's an old Sag Harbor schoolhouse that is on Sayers Path in Wainscott. So talk about more
Wow,
moving
no
buildings.
kidding.
Yeah. And if you go by, you'll see it has a little sign that says the schoolhouse. So
Wow,
doesn't look
that's
at all like it used to, I'm sure, but it was a schoolhouse that was moved from Sag Harbor to Wainscott.
okay. Again, touching on the point we made earlier in this episode, how
Yep.
moving buildings was no big deal back then. I mean,
Right.
it's just really was nothing much to think about. But
Well,
we
I think
also
it
should
was cheaper to do that than build from
build
scratch, right?
that. Yeah,
Today,
and
it's just the
again,
opposite. We knock everything down, even if it's less than 10 years old. Yeah.
exactly. And again, it was just something that was done, the recycling, repurposing. And yeah, to your point, easier than starting from scratch. But
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
interesting how this building was sold in 2015, according to this article. And what warms my heart now, again, 2015, so we're 9 years ago, they the owners were happy with a 1,350 square foot house. Because again, we've made this point, Esperanza, that's the primary bedroom closet
Right.
these
Yeah. It's
days.
the pantry, I think. Yeah. I'm
It's the
kidding.
pantry, yeah. So you could, 28 different kinds of beans,
Hmm. Hmm.
can
And
be
quinoa.
stored. But really super cool. And before we get to Sagaponack Wainscott, we should also touch on the old Amagansett one-room schoolhouse. According to this article, before he died in 2017, Dr. Huntington Sheldon lived on Atlantic Avenue, donated it to the school district, which installed the structure at the property at the corner of Main Street and Neoncoma Lane, which is where the current Amagansett School is,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
Um, this building from 1802 was moved multiple times before it made its way one more time down Atlantic Avenue to its present location, which
Right.
I guess trying to picture it. I've been
It's
on
right
that.
on the corner there, of
Okay.
where the school is. It's right on the corner of that
Okay.
street
Okay.
and Montauk Highway.
So it is okay. So we got it. So it is still there.
Yes.
Still okay. Wonderful. Okay. And now we're going to start to get into we're going to make this a little bit more relevant to present day. Sagaponack, again, a present day little red schoolhouse, still there. The village's third school building, built in 1885, $300 in materials and labor, Esperanza, at the time. Okay. Expanded in 1920. And apparently, according to this article by Christine Sampson, the Sagaponack School has maintained a history of this building, which began in 1776. Okay, same year this country was born officially. Um, Very cool. I mean, the school has recorded and published the names of every one of its teachers going back to 1886. And Esperanza, inside the school, a movable wall, sometimes used to
Sometimes used.
partition, right, to partition the classroom. This is still a one-room schoolhouse. I'm sorry. I'm with Esperanza on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Come on. Come on. Okay.
So there's a little part of the history here that I'm going to, and I keep meaning to reach out to Sagaponack School, not to be contradictory, but I don't think that they've got their history 100% correct. And they do have this on their website, the school, but they claim that the second wood frame schoolhouse was sold, which in 1884, it says, was sold and became Wainscott's third schoolhouse. That's impossible.
Okay. Okay. I,
Or
I'm
maybe
afraid of
not.
Esperanza, so I'm not going to
Maybe I'm
fight her.
wrong. Maybe it is the third schoolhouse. Now that
Right.
third schoolhouse, just so everybody knows, still exists.
Okay.
So there is a third schoolhouse. It's like a Queen Anne style schoolhouse. In fact, my connection to the third schoolhouse is that our little house that we saved through Wainscott Heritage Project was an accessory building to that third schoolhouse, right? So in the late 1800s until 1931, it
Right.
functioned as, or 1930. Then there, I think it was a Mr. Porter or something like that, who lived on the Sagaponack side of Town Line Road, bought it because they needed
Okay.
a new schoolhouse in Wainscott. And so he took that third schoolhouse.
You think
And
was that the artist David Porter? You think
no,
it
no,
was?
he was a
A,
farmer.
oh, a
Yeah,
different Porter.
this was a
Okay, got it.
farmer. And again, I might be completely off on that name. But it was moved up close to where Town Line Barbecue is, so
Okay.
just south of Montauk Highway. And it is still there. It was restored in recent years, and there is an enormous residence that was built right next to it. It's on that property, and
Right.
so it is still there. And that's the only thing I'm wondering, if that third schoolhouse, I thought it had been constructed by the people of Wainscott, and I think I have those that history, but maybe it was an inheritance or a purchase from
Right.
Sagaponack. But there's another one that's still there and is probably being used as like a, a gym now,
Well, and yeah, well, I mean, to your
a
point, I
private
mean,
gym.
this little paragraph about it, from the East Hampton Star says, uh, and again, remember, 5 years ago, this was written. The old Queen Anne style structure is on private property, exactly where you said, Town Line Road, awaiting restoration. But
Oh, there you go.
apparently, it's been restored over the past few
It
years,
has
as you
been,
brought out.
yes. And
So,
it
uh,
faces the street. It's it's a nice little feature on the road.
right. And again, as of 2015, according to this article, the Sagaponack School was one of fewer than 400 one-room schoolhouses still in operation. So
In the
that's
state or in the
in around the United
around the
States,
country? Okay.
according to a report from NPR.
Mm.
But as we start to get into uh, closing, again, wrapping some of this up, we do have to get to Wainscott. And obviously, any listener of Our Hamptons podcast knows Esperanza lives in Wainscott. Her children attended the Wainscott School. And not to mention, as she just touched on, her involvement with Wainscott Heritage Project. So she's
But
all in with this
but
community. Yes.
Irwin, this is
Yes.
not an Our Wainscott podcast.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, this isn't our Wayne's, the same way it's not our Queens or our Great Neck. We just
Maybe I will do a little branch. I'll branch off and do an
exactly.
Our Wainscott.
Yeah, so sort of like when the Jeffersons branched off from All in the Family or whatever. Um, but so now the Wainscott School, and I'm gonna ask Esperanza, some of the experiences she had with her kids being they're not in the school anymore.
Oh yeah,
But
no, my son is still
oh,
there.
okay, your son is still
Yes.
there. He's in
Yeah.
fourth grade now, so it's his
He's in
last year.
third grade.
Third grade. All right, I'm aging him and you, so sorry for that. Okay. So the way, again, going into this article, Wainscott School Community, well known for cherishing the evolution of education in this hamlet. Sign on the school property indicates it was 1730. History of the school on its websites says a second account puts the origin of the school at 1796. To the point you brought up earlier in this episode, Esperanza, three purposes: church, school, town hall. That was what the building was. And
again, we're talking very tiny buildings back in the 18th century.
That is correct. And
which unfortunately we don't have. We only have one photograph of what we think was one of these schoolhouses, but otherwise they were, obviously not photographable in the 18th century.
Right.
And they were lost to fire, or I think fire was the
first one, according to the article, was destroyed in a fire in 1826 or 7. Now, the one-room schoolhouse was built. The current one-room schoolhouse was built in the 30s, and the auxiliary
1931.
Building, right, and the auxiliary was built in the recent past, 2008. It was open, right? So
yeah, I mean, really, the 1931 schoolhouse, which is the fourth schoolhouse, would be the auxiliary or the accessory building to which it currently is being used for instruction. I mean, it always has been. Right. Sort of like the makeshift, if you will, gym or music room. It's a flexible space, but right now it's actually used as a classroom.
Got it. Now we're gonna touch it. There's actually, I found a New York Times article from 2001, 23 years ago, but there's some interesting little tidbits we'll bring in from there. But I almost want to go a little bit more present day and personal. Now again, I don't know how many people in our audience have attended a one-room school, have ever actually been a student of a one-room schoolhouse. Again, speaking for myself, growing up in Queens, we normally had 49 to 73 kids in a class. So it was
twice what Wainscott has in the whole school.
Yeah, so it was definitely a little bit different for me. I can't really relate to this, but Esperanza, as a parent of two kids that have one who's still actually there. So, and just to bring our audience sort of up to speed in how these kind of schools operate. Now, Wainscott goes from kindergarten to fourth grade. So in theory, into third grade, excuse me.
No, fourth grade, you're right.
Fourth grade.
Currently,
I was right. Okay. So when your kids were there, they were always in class with kids of different ages. Am I correct? Like it wasn't, obviously just wasn't third grade with third grade.
Right. I mean, even right now, let's say since the fourth grade is there, the instruction is for third and fourth grade together. And
Right.
then kindergarten and first grade, you know, there's like kindergarten, I think kindergarten, first grade, and then I think there may be a second grade separate. I'm not really sure actually right now
Right.
how it's all divided. But definitely all of these children inevitably are, I mean, there were just over 20 of them.
Right.
They're always doing things together. And
Right.
there's a lot of what from what I've seen, instruction, you know, like peer to like the older kids to the younger kids, which creates to me a lot of empathy. And I know that they're in that article that you were just going to introduce from the New York Times, the teacher at the time, which is early 2000s, was discussing how important this is to have this multi-age education and the significance of that. And I find that that's something that we've lost in contemporary, you know, modern contemporary education in schools.
A totally true. And again, while it's something I can't relate to personally, I have thought about
You
this
can
issue.
appreciate it, right?
I
Like
can
you can think
appreciate it,
about
and
it. Yeah.
exactly, and thinking about how there is a benefit to younger kids and older kids being together. Again, I'm not talking about a 17-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm talking about, a grade or two apart.
Hmm.
Um, I see it with my own grandchildren who are like, a couple of them are two, we'll call it school grades, even though they're young. They're not in school yet, but a 5-year-old can play with a 3-year-old the same way a
Yeah.
5-year-old and a 7-year-old in an education setting can sort of complement each other. I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's something nice about it,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but
I think it, yeah, definitely there's a lot to be said for that. And of course, I think we were talking about before how this idea of the one room schoolhouse unfortunately has been lost over the years because
right.
for obvious reasons, population growth being the main one, but also the bureaucratic setup of everything. And but that like we were losing that that possibility of having this multi-age education be a part of even a normal, you know, quote unquote normal or regular school setting, I think it'd be so great.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
mean, your kids certainly don't seem to be suffering from that kind of
Well,
environment. I mean,
that's
they
yeah, good
thrived in
good
it.
point, right? Like we're not suffering from it. I think that, you know, there is an age where they're better off having more people,
Right.
kids around, but I don't know. I don't really find it that. I mean, what about all the homeschool kids, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But, and, going back, sort of like where from the history repeats itself file, looking at this article from the New York Times from 2001, which, there is sort of a nostalgic kind of vibe with it. You know, this is a place, speaking about Wainscott. And again, we've spoken about Wainscott. We did 2 episodes about Wainscott, early on in our Hamptons podcast, I remember. And it's been touched on just basically so often due to Esperanza living there and her being active with Wainscott Heritage Project. But it's a place with a yesteryear feel. And nowhere is it stronger than at the corner of Main Street and Wainscott Hollow Road, where the school has stood since 1931. And this article brings out how, when they were talking about expanding the school and everything else, the community was very upset by it. This was
Quite a
part
few
of the
people,
fabric
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
of
Well,
the
the idea,
community.
right, the idea of losing the character of that school, and I think that continues to this day. I mean, I know we're going to be running out of time, and it's not our Wainscott podcast,
Right.
but just recently in the last year with budget not being approved and fourth grade having to be moved in, and before that, you know, there was some discussion about, well, we need to add on to the new building and make this
Right.
and do that, but then that implies a whole other basket full of changes that most people, when asked, don't want, whether they have students in the school or not. So um, and then there's the danger of just being absorbed, consolidated, and erased. And then we'll have a museum like everybody else.
And I think, in the interest of time, and since we do want to wrap this up, I think I'm going to wrap this up, Esperanza, with just touching on a point that the then school board president, Gordon Wooten at the time,
Mhm.
who I think he was seemed to be a little bit more for, the potential expansion of the school because, and now this,
I think he felt it was inevitable, right?
right.
Yeah.
He good. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for cleaning me up. That's exactly what he felt, but the article brings out here, and we're going to sort of close on this because I think it really touches on, not only the history of Wainscott, but a history of one of its more prominent families, how perhaps Mr. Wooten hadn't spoken to Roger Walker.
Yes.
Now, the Walkers, he was former town justice, from a, right? I mean, a large Wainscott family. They've
Yeah,
lived there for probably,
significant since the 19th century. Yeah.
right.
Late
And
19th
now,
century.
Roger Walker, who at the time summed up his position on school expansion, and this is a quote, "No way." And Roger Walker, he passed away a couple of years ago, but again, really prominent member of the community, generational member of the community. Esperanza, he said, and this is still Mr. Walker talking, "The school is a landmark, and you can't take that away. It still stands in my mind as a symbol of what used to be, and too many things are going up here in Wainscott."
And what a great way to sum that up from a person who had an important position in town life,
Right.
had an important family in Wainscott life.
That's right.
But yeah, this is like a theme. It's not just about these schoolhouses, it's about everything, right?
I can't think of a better way to close this episode by echoing what Esperanza just said. It's about everything.
And I want to say, like Mr. Walker, Judge Walker, no way.
Right.
we can't keep doing this. No way.
Exactly.
Let's
Well,
preserve all we have. And these schoolhouses are like, I really like, let's encourage anybody, as we have periodically in this episode. All these historical societies have done such an amazing job, town, municipalities too, to preserve these structures, and we need to respect them and keep them in our not just in our history, in our present.
respect them, visit them, and perhaps most importantly, support them because
Yes.
they are doing important work. And again, this is important work really within the community we live in and love. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Esperanza, that was
Thanks. Love
fun.
all these old schoolhouses. Thanks,
Exactly.
Irwin.
Maybe a road trip is in our future.
I think we should have a little tour,
Oh,
an Our Hamptons tour of schoolhouses.
can I be the docent?
Yeah.
Thanks, Esperanza.
Lots of fun. Thanks, Irwin.
Thanks so much for joining us. New episodes of Our Hamptons are released every other Tuesday. Find them wherever you get your podcasts.